Some of the most important discoveries about the human mind did not come from classrooms or laboratories that followed ethical rules. They came from experiments that should never have happened. Experiments hidden from the public, approved in silence, and often forgotten on purpose, not because they failed, but because they worked too well. During the 20th century, governments and institutions became obsessed with one question: how much of human behavior can be controlled, not influenced, controlled? The answer was disturbing enough that many of the experiments were buried, renamed, or quietly ended without explanation. One of the most infamous examples was not designed to break the body, but the mind. Participants were told they were helping science. In reality, they were being slowly stripped of certainty. Authority figures instructed them to perform actions they believed were harmful to others. Each step was small, almost reasonable, and that was the point. What researchers discovered was not cruelty, but obedience. Ordinary people, under the right conditions, would override their own moral instincts simply because an authority told them to continue. What made this experiment truly unsettling was not the results, but how predictable they were. The human brain is wired to defer responsibility when structure and hierarchy are present. When someone else appears in control, the mind relaxes its resistance. Choice feels optional. Guilt feels distant. Other experiments went even further. Some focused on isolation. Subjects were placed alone in controlled environments with minimal stimulation. No clocks, no windows, no human contact. At first the mind resisted, then it adapted, and finally it began to create its own reality. Hallucinations appeared. Time lost meaning. Identity weakened. Researchers learned that the human sense of self is not fixed. It is maintained through constant feedback from the environment. Remove that feedback, and the self begins to dissolve. This knowledge did not stay in academic journals. It quietly shaped interrogation techniques, training programs, and psychological warfare. If identity can be destabilized, then belief can be rebuilt, not through force, but through absence. Perhaps the most controversial experiments were those involving children, not because the science was complex, but because the conclusions were impossible to ignore. Researchers wanted to know how early authority, reward, and punishment could shape lifelong behavior. What they found was that early experiences do not simply influence personality. They define the boundaries of what the mind considers normal. Fear learned early becomes automatic. Trust learned early becomes default. The brain does not question these patterns, it protects them. There were also experiments that focused on perception itself. Subjects were shown images and sounds that contradicted each other. Over time, the brain stopped trusting one sense over another. Reality became negotiable. The mind learned that what feels real is not always what is accurate. This opened a dangerous door. If perception can be trained, then truth becomes flexible. One experiment explored how long it takes for a human to accept a false reality if everyone else appears to agree with it. The answer was shockingly short. Within minutes, many participants abandoned their own senses to align with the group, not because they believed the group was right, but because disagreement felt unsafe. The brain treats social exclusion as a threat. Agreement becomes a survival instinct. Some of these studies were eventually exposed. Others were quietly absorbed into military and intelligence research. A few were officially condemned, but the knowledge gained was never erased. It was refined, sanitized, reframed as behavioral science. What makes these experiments disturbing is not just what they reveal about institutions, but what they reveal about us. The human mind is adaptable, efficient, and fragile. It protects itself by simplifying reality. It obeys when overwhelmed. It seeks comfort even when comfort hides manipulation. The unsettling truth is that these experiments did not create new weaknesses. They exposed existing ones. Weaknesses that still exist today in modern environments filled with constant stimulation, authority signals, and social pressure. The same mechanisms are active. Only now they are subtle, invisible, normalized. The question is no longer whether the human mind can be controlled. The question is how often it already is, without realizing it, and whether awareness alone is enough to change that.